Good evening, I'm Rohit Sharma and welcome to Desi from DC, coming to you every night from the heart of Washington. On my show, every day I say, this is where America's power corridors meet India's prime time to break down the political, economic, and global stories that shape both nations live from Washington, DC. And that is exactly what has happened. India Today, an Archduke with India Today Global, got an exclusive interview with none other than Russian President Vladimir Putin. The interview comes at a time when Washington is eagerly waiting to end the war in Ukraine and is being watched closely by the world. Everybody in Washington, D.C. was watching this interview to understand what's on the mind of President Putin. In a first of its kind for any Indian news channel, Archduke's Anjana Om Kashyap and India Today's Geeta Mohan asked President Putin about the war in Ukraine, the tariffs of India, and the future of global politics and his relationship with India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Take a look.
Dear viewers, hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Archduke India Today and I'm Anjana Om Kashyap and we're at Kremlin today and you're about to witness history.
Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan. We have with us a man who is known to be one of the world's longest serving leaders. He's seen it all through wars and economic recessions, from disintegration of countries to a changed world order, from Boris Yeltsin to Donald Trump, from Atal Bihari Vajpayee to Manmohan Singh to Narendra Modi. He's seen the world change right in front of him, and he's taken Russia through very turbulent times and yet has cemented his position as a force to reckon with. Thank you so much, President, for doing this with us. You're in conversation with India Today and Archduke. That's the President of the Russian Federation for you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our network. How are you doing?
Надеюсь, что и вам у нас в России.
I hope you'll enjoy your stay in Russia.
Москва нравится, Кремль, где мы сейчас с вами работаем.
Hope that you like Moscow and the Kremlin, where we're currently collaborating together.
По плану, в целом мы довольны ситуацией.
As you see, everything is going on as planned. On the whole, we're satisfied with the current economic situation.
Что предстоит встреча, как вот
Most importantly, I'm delighted to be meeting, as you've mentioned, my friend Prime Minister Modi.
мы давно договаривались увидеться именно в Индии.
We have made a specific arrangement to do so in India because there are numerous topics on which we need to talk, and our collaboration with India spans an extensive array. And, of course, the unique nature of our relationship adds another layer of significance.
Ну и хотел бы сказать, что и путь, который прошла Индия с момента завоевания.
I also want to highlight that India's progress over the past 77 years since gaining independence, an extremely brief span in historical terms, has been substantial indeed, and India has truly come a long way in development.
India remains the world's largest buyer of Russian defense equipment, accounting for nearly 38% of Russia's arms exports. But with mounting American pressure and sanctions threatening India's strategic partnership, my colleague Anjana Om Kashyap asked President Putin the question on everyone's mind. Will Russia back down under Western arm twisting, or will Moscow double down on its commitment to India? In a world where geopolitics increasingly dictates trade, how does one of our oldest defense partnerships navigate these turbulent waters? Let's hear what President Putin had to say.
Defense. And India continues to be the biggest defense buyer. Roughly 38% of the market from Russia is bought by India. My question to you, sir, is in view of the sanctions by the US or the tariffs they have laid on India, the arm twisting methods that are being adopted, and I name it's America. How do you plan to circumvent all this? Will you pull back or push harder?
Но мне кажется, что и Индия, весь мир увидели.
It appears that both India and the world recognize that India cannot continue to be treated the way it was treated 77 years ago. India is a major global player, not a British colony, and everyone must accept this reality. Furthermore, Prime Minister Modi is not someone who succumbs to pressure easily. The Indian people can certainly take pride in their leader. This is absolutely obvious. His stance is unwavering and straightforward without being confrontational. Our goal is not to provoke conflict. Rather, we aim to protect our lawful rights. India does the same. What are the obstacles? Obstacles in settlements. However, over 90% of our transactions are already conducted in national currencies. While some complications arise due to the presence of numerous intermediaries, there are also solutions. We can switch to the existing systems for exchanging electronic messages on financial transactions of the Bank of Russia and of our partners in India. These efforts are ongoing and advancing. Those who attempt to hinder economic ties with third countries ultimately encounter difficulties and suffer losses. I am confident that once this perspective becomes firmly established, such tactics of applying external pressure will fade away.
President Trump has repeatedly said that he's a peacemaker. He said that he's brought peace between India and Pakistan, and now he's eyeing the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But are these just claims, or there is substance behind the swagger? My colleague Geeta Mohan asked President Putin directly, does he genuinely believe President Trump can broker peace in Ukraine? It's a fascinating question because Putin's answer reveals not just his views on President Trump, but also the complex motivation, humanitarian, political, and economic, driving American foreign policy.
Right, he has spoken about intentions. You're right about that. You know, he's claimed to have ended wars. He's been claiming, much to India's disappointment, that he brought about or brokered a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. And now he's looking at Russia, Ukraine, he's looking at Israel. Do you really think Trump is a peacemaker?
Ну, в случае, касающегося ситуации на Украине...
Regarding the situation in Ukraine, yes, let me repeat once again. I am absolutely certain, with no doubt at all, he sincerely aims for a peaceful resolution. Let me stress once again. The United States may have various reasons for this.
И гуманитарного характера, лично для Трампа.
Humanitarian ones, personally for Trump, because he genuinely wants to end hostilities and prevent further loss of life. But there could also be political interests tied to ending the confrontation between Russia and Ukraine.
И экономические тоже. Кстати говоря, в сфере...
Or economic motives too. By the way, they can be in the energy area and in other areas.
Восстановление отношений экономического характера между...
There are numerous areas where restoring economic relations between the US and Russia would benefit both sides. I showed you some letters, I won't go into this right now, large US companies sent to us. We should remember this.
Не забывать о том, что они есть.
Really? Oh.
Of course.
Конечно, о том, что они...
About their existence. They're waiting until all problems are solved and they are ready to return to us. They want this, asking us not to forget about them. The letters are there. What's so surprising about that? Many want to return. So, of course the Indian government is saying, right, why should we leave?
Now, to make sense of all that has transpired in the last 14 hours or so, with President Putin landing in India, with him giving a bear hug to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and both of them driving in the same car towards Prime Minister's residence. And then we saw the pictures that came out from Prime Minister's residence, where Prime Minister Modi even gifted the holy book of Gita to Russian President Vladimir Putin. We wanted to understand how Washington is looking at this. A short while ago, I was able to talk to Hudson Institute's research fellow, Aparna Pandey. And joining me now is Aparna Pandey, who is the research fellow at the Hudson Institute here in Washington, D.C. Aparna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rohit. It's a pleasure.
Aparna, how is Washington looking at this visit by President Putin to India? You know, he's landed in India, and we saw those images of Prime Minister Modi hugging Vladimir Putin at the airport, breaking protocol. Some say to go receive President Putin, and then both of them driving off in the same car, reaching Prime Minister's residence for a 40-minute conversation. And importantly, he hasn't said much yet, but there was an interview done by India today, which is, obviously seen by millions across the globe. What's your take sitting here in Washington, D.C., just by the optics of what we've seen until so far?
So the optics are big, and the optics are important for both countries. It's a strategic relationship for India, especially for India, but even for Russia. And so the optics, so it will be symbolically and substantively, it is very important that this visit goes well. And so what we see right now is the symbolic aspect. The Prime Minister greets certain leaders at the airport. It will include the Russian president, the American president when he comes. And if the Chinese president comes, so will he be greeted at the airport. And so is the bro hug, which is a common, Prime Minister Modi phenomenon. This relationship is this visit is being viewed from Washington in two angles. Those who follow India understand very well that the relationship with Russia is a time-tested partnership, as I believe the Prime Minister tweeted this a few hours ago. It's a time-tested partnership between India and Russia. It's a strategic partnership. For India, Russia is a continental balancer against China. It is also India's hedge against, a mercurial or transactional, semi-isolationist American presidency. And it is a very important source of Indian military equipment. For Russia, India is a purchaser of Russian equipment. And Russia would like to ensure that India remains strategically autonomous and does not get too close to United States. So this visit is important for both.
Now, President Putin, not known for doing a lot of media interaction. I mean, he does it with his state media. Obviously, gives a good interview, an hour-long interview to India Today, and he talks about double standards in the interview. He talks about how these punitive tariffs that U.S. has put on India shouldn't be there because U.S. itself is purchasing nuclear fuel, from Russia. He also talked about that India should have strategic autonomy, in engaging with partners and doesn't have to rely on one state versus the other. And the last, and to some of my question right now is the last bit of the gist of what he was trying to say was that India and Russia, obviously have these long ties, but at the end of the day, India is much more closer to Russia than what Western powers believe. And even if what we've seen in the last 20, 25 years, India still remains that. So how do you see that? Is that a messaging to Washington saying, look, I want to go to India and I can do this and we can have trade and we can have all these sort of commitments. We saw, India and Russia signing the 10-year deal with having troops that could possibly be deployed in each other's territory, depending on what situation is. So is President Putin trying to say, look, this relationship is mine with India, and I can be the bellwether partner for India rather than somebody else?
So I think both India and Russia will try to send that message. This is a signaling happening. India is sending the message that India has options. That the Tianjin SCO summit was India's way of sending the message that we can have a relationship with China and with Russia if we want, at the same time as we are a close partner of the United States and Europe and Japan and Australia. Here, President Putin coming after 4 years. He's coming after the last time he came was, I believe, before the Ukraine war, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is 4 years later, and this is at a time when there are Russia-US talks going on to resolve the conflict. It was a more confident Vladimir Putin who's coming to India. And he wants to send, and he understands the signaling that Delhi is doing. And so he is adding on to that signaling. But I would put, there's a word of caution here. India balances, and India will balance, India believes India's ideal world order is a multipolar world order in which US, Russia, China, Europe, Japan, India, all these countries are prominent poles. So India is not going to choose anyone, whether it be Russia or United States or Japan. India is going to balance among all of these. Secondly, at the end of the day, India's biggest concern and threat comes from China. And the no limits partnership between Russia and China is a challenge for Indian policymakers. And the very close defense partnership between Russia and China is a challenge for Indian policymakers. And I don't believe President Putin has as yet reassured India that if there is an India-China conflict, which side will Russia choose?
Interesting. Before I let you go, one final thought on this. Tomorrow is lined up for big meetings in New Delhi. He's going to be obviously having state visit. He's going to see the president, another meeting, round of meetings, I should say, with the Indian side. How would President Trump look at this? He was busy today signing another peace agreement here in Washington, D.C. He's going to be lighting up a Christmas tree, from like in like an hour from now or so. But how was his team viewing this, especially when the talks with Ukraine peace are progressing and we keep hearing different things every single day? Can India nudge Russia to finally achieve peace in Ukraine?
Can India nudge Russia? Can India nudge Ukraine? Absolutely. Will India do it? I am not sure. Historically, India's stance towards any conflict outside of its region is we would like that conflict to come to an end. We encourage both sides to have talks with each other. But India does not play a role as a peacemaker or get involved in conflicts outside its sort of its neighborhood, and that's the tack India has taken with respect to Ukraine as well. India would like Russia and Ukraine to talk to each other, resolve the conflict, and move on. But India is not a peacemaker and sort of a country which goes around trying to resolve conflicts for others. So will the Ukraine issue come up? I'm sure it will. Will India sort of try to push try to push both sides to come to resolve the conflict? I don't think so. How will President Trump look at this? I don't know. If he's paying, if he does pay, if somebody brings it to his attention, he may tweet about it or Truth Social, or he may ignore it. It will all depend, on how he views it. And if right now he believes Russia is doing a good job, he may be fine with India-Russia relations. I think we'll have to wait and see about that, Rohit.
Especially, at a time when President Trump has called for a G2, which means China and the US are the two biggest power in the world. So we'll have to wait and watch how much attention is he paying to President Putin's visit to India. Aparna, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. Great. Thanks, John.
US President Donald Trump recently made headlines with a sharp comment accusing India of funding the Russia-Ukraine war by purchasing Russian oil. It is a charge that strikes at the heart of India's strategic autonomy. My colleague Anjana Om Kashyap puts President Putin on the spot, asking him to characterize the American leader and respond to these allegations. Does Trump have a point, or is this yet another example of Western double standards? Putin's response reveals an interesting contradiction in American foreign policy itself.
I never give character assessments about my colleagues, neither those I've worked with in the past, nor current leaders of individual states. These assessments should be made by citizens who vote for their leader during elections. As for India's purchases or purchase of energy resources from Russia, well, I would like to note, and have already mentioned this publicly once, the United States itself still buys nuclear fuel from us for its own nuclear power plants. That is also fuel, uranium for the reactors operating in the United States. If the US has the right to buy our fuel, why shouldn't India have the same privilege? This question deserves thorough examination, and we stand ready to discuss it, including with President Trump.
Russia and India have enjoyed decades of friendship, but which Indian Prime Minister truly made the difference? Geeta Mohan asks Putin to look back across his years in power and identify the leader who most enhanced this partnership. It's a delicate question, one that requires diplomatic finesse. While Putin praises current Prime Minister Narendra Modi's sincerity and commitment, his answer reveals what he values most in leadership: integrity, reliability, and genuine personal connection beyond mere political transactions.
No, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. We have letters from American companies, letters they have sent us, where they urge us not to forget about their existence. These are our former partners, who did not leave by choice. They express a clear desire to resume cooperation and are waiting, among other things, for a corresponding political signal.
This interview, this conversation is becoming very interesting, sir, because there are so many highlights of understanding it. It's really pleasant to see you and your sense of humor and how you're putting things forth. But now we'll go on to a very serious matter, and that is the Russia-Ukraine war. So what, in your view, would constitute a victory for Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war? What are the red lines? Because you have, and I quote you, you have said very clearly that Russia will lay down arms only if Kiev's troops withdraw from territory claimed by Russia. Which paths would that be?
You know, it's not about victory, like you have said. The point is that Russia is determined, and will certainly do so, to protect its interests, protect its people living there, protect our traditional values, Russian language, and so on. Protection by the way of religion that has been cultivated on these lands for centuries. Yet you know that the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine is almost banned. They seize churches, drive people out of temples, and so on. It is a problem. And I'm not even mentioning the ban on the Russian language and so on. It is all part of a big set of issues.
And all eyes will be on India tomorrow as Russian President Vladimir Putin meets with Prime Minister Modi again for the bilateral meeting and the events that has been lined up for him, including a state dinner and also meeting the Indian president. So we'll be bringing you more updates from Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India. So that wraps up our tonight's edition of Desi from DC. This is Rohit Sharma for India Today and India Today Global. And if you're watching us on India Today Global, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button before you leave. Stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, stay curious. Thank you. Goodbye.